All right, always a nice reminder to see that the internet is not the real world and to see that the outrage porn that we are constantly being fed on the internet, the hate clicks, the just nonstop misery, that does not reflect wider society at large. Dragon Age the Veilguard is currently the #1 top seller on Steam worldwide, knocking off Call of Duty, and this is coming from Okami13 on Twitter. Biggest Steam launch ever for BioWare with 68,000 concurrent players. It was even up a little bit higher than that when it peaked. Biggest single player game ever for EA, passing up Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So yeah, Dragon Age the Veilguard is a massive, massive success, and especially for a franchise, you're talking about a game that is, we're 4 games into the franchise at this point. They've never been massive, mainstream, huge hits. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Inquisition is the best selling, and I think it's just over 10 million copies sold for that game. And it's a very narrative dependent franchise, and this is a follow-up to Inquisition, so not necessarily a sequel, but it is a follow-up to those events, and the game releases 10 years after those events took place, meaning the game Veilguard releases 10 years after Inquisition released in 2014. So a massive uphill battle for this thing to fight, and once again, very, very narrative dependent, whereas you have something like Dragon's Dogma 2 that released this year, and Dragon's Dogma 1 released in 2012, 2013, something like that. And do you really need to know the story of Dragon's Dogma 1 before going into Dragon's Dogma 2? No. The story's dog shit, but the combat's like some of the greatest combat ever, and that's why people hop into Dragon's Dogma. It's like literally, it might be the most fun I've ever had with any combat system in any video game ever. It's so fucking sick. But really, I will say though, shout out. I'm only, I don't know, maybe I played it for like 5 hours straight, Dragon Age the Veilguard last night, so I'm really early in, so just quick early impressions. The combat is sick, man. The combat in Dragon Age the Veilguard is really good. I just unlocked an ability where I can deflect projectiles back at enemies, so I'm pulling up my shield right as they throw their projectile attack. I'm deflecting it back at them. Just a nice little rebound effect there going on. I have the ability now where I can set explosives on my shield. I can throw my shield like damn Captain America and it'll explode, and there's some real cool shit in the combat. You can throw your shield, and if you time it perfectly, you can just keep hitting it back at enemies. Like you throw it and then it rebounds back to you, and then you press triangle and you just keep bashing that bitch back towards enemies. Real fun combat in this game, man. That's the biggest surprise to me, because I always thought the combat in those games were total dog shit. And Inquisition, man, Inquisition had really bad combat in my opinion. And yeah, Veilguard just really strong combat so far. I'm stunned. It's for any of you out there who are big, PlayStation first party fans, I would say give this a look if you're into something like God of War, but you want to make decisions. That's kind of what I've been feeling with Veilguard so far. It feels a lot more action adventure-y than, the role playing really comes from specking out your character and making your choices and shit, but yeah, we're kind of in a drought right now in terms of the big heavy hitter AAA Sony first party games, and this somewhat feels like what if Sony Santa Monica made an RPG? This is kind of what I'm getting with Dragon Age the Veilguard. Really cool shit so far. But yeah, and obviously I'll dive more into it once I finish the game, and we'll talk about that at the end of the month with the ranking. But huge success for BioWare, huge success for Dragon Age, and it's cool to, when you look at the future for BioWare, really this is where I'm the most concerned, is I'm not a big Dragon Age guy. I finished 1 and 2. I played like 30 hours of Inquisition. Inquisition just, I hated the open world. And that's another cool thing. It's like much more linear, feels more classic BioWare. But when I think of BioWare, what I'm really looking for and what I'm hoping this can lead to is the success of Veilguard leads to, you know, Mass Effect, whatever they're going to title the next Mass Effect, getting a real steep budget, you know, putting some real resources behind that thing, and just the fact that it's going to come out in general. You know, I was worried with the launch of Veilguard, like if it plummeted, if it didn't do well at all, that probably would have been it for BioWare. EA probably would have cut their losses, and you know, BioWare probably would have been no more. So the fact that this thing is a huge hit, definitely, I think that ensures without a shadow of a doubt we do end up seeing Mass Effect. And there were also talk online, I believe, I don't know if it was the developer for Mass Effect was talking about the art style is going to be totally different for Mass Effect. It's going to be more, you know, photorealistic in Mass Effect opposed to the somewhat cartoonish fantasy vibe that we have in the Veilguard. But yeah, man, you know, it's just nice to see that really at the end of the day, what people want are good games. And good games are always going to outweigh the noise surrounding the game. You know what I mean? You saw it last year with Hogwarts. A bunch of kicking and screaming definitely didn't prevent that game from going on to sell gangbusters. And, you know, one of the best games of 2023 without a shadow of a doubt. And I feel, you know, if I'm very early into Veilguard, but if it continues at a similar trajectory, it'll definitely be in my, you know, top 5, top 10 games of the year. But by the end of the year, it's really, really strong. And it's nice to see good games. That's all people want. Just really damn good video games. And it's funny, you know, I made a video a little while back kind of going into the silly controversy surrounding Veilguard, and I brought up Hogwarts Legacy as well. And someone was like, "Oh, you're bringing up Hogwarts Legacy, trying to be a fence sitter." It's like, dude, it's so funny to me that you'll hear often online people say, "Ah, man, we missed the days where games coverage was just about the games." And it's like, you know, I try to provide that, and then you get called a fucking fence sitter. And once again, this is all just silly online noise that you gotta do a better job of blocking out. And I gotta tell myself, hey, dude, you gotta do a better job of blocking all this shit out. But at the end of the day, whenever you're trying to put shit out consistently and trying to, you know, take viewer feedback, take audience feedback, and not just be one of those people who don't interact with their audience whatsoever, don't give a shit about what their audience says. It's like, yeah, you know, sometimes you read one of those comments, you're just like, what? It's a head scratcher. You're like, what the fuck? You can't win. There's no winning with some of these people. But in those situations, you know, you got to buckle down and just do what you think is right, I guess. And and not even necessarily right, but I just like covering video games. Like I personally enjoy playing games and looking at the game from just examining the game in and of itself and making my opinion based on that and solely that, and not looking at the outside factors and trying to block out the noise as much as possible, which obviously can be really fucking hard as we're sitting here talking about. But it's I don't know, I just think that is important, because I do personally prefer my reviewers or people that I'm listening to, you know, who are talking about games and providing their criticism. I prefer the criticism to be about the product and not about all the outside bullshit. So I, on the channel, try to provide that here as best as possible. But yeah, man, it's nice to see that the online discourse, the kicking and screaming, like it doesn't reflect real world normal people. Like they just want to play good video games. You know, they worked fucking 10 hours. They want to come home, pop in a good story-driven game for an hour or two, escape reality for a bit. Most people ain't paying attention to all this crazy fucking silly discourse that's going around online. And you saw it last year with Hogwarts going on to be the best-selling game of the year and one of the best-selling games of the generation, maybe even the best-selling game of the generation. And now with Veilguard, which Veilguard obviously will never have that level of success. It's just, like I said, of the 4th game in a franchise of games that peak around 10 million copies sold, which that was on the PS4 in 2014. And So that game had an incredibly long generation for 12 million copies to be sold in the span of 10 years or whatever for Dragon Age Inquisition. Like, it had a long tail. You're seeing people already doing the whole thing, and I hate to even drag internet garbage into this, but it is funny where you're seeing people be like, oh, well, compared to fucking Elden Ring, or compared to Black Myth Wukong, or compared to, whatever best-selling game, Dragon Age is mere peanuts compared to these behemoths. It's like, no shit, dude. Dragon Age is never going to sell on that level. It never has sold on that level. And so it's you just got to tune out a lot of that noise, because a lot of that noise, it's just from people that don't really know much of what they're talking about. And it's unfortunate that so many people who don't really know much of what they're talking about talk so much. But at the end of the day, that's just what you're going to get with the internet. And you gotta take the good and the bad with it. But that's the thing that's so cool about just seeing the real world people go out and buy the game, check it out, and it's like majorly positive reviews on PlayStation, on Steam. It's the best selling game on PlayStation right now. It's the best selling game on Steam right now. So like, the real world people are out there and showing that the opinions of the internet dwellers don't really fucking hold any real weight. And so yeah, just nice to see. And just kind of staying right there for a second, talking about Steam charts. If you look at something like Silent Hill 2 Remake, a game that was only on PC and PlayStation at launch, it peaked at around 23,000 concurrents on Steam. And that game sold over 1 million copies in less than a week. And Dragon Age: The Veilguard peaked at, 3 times the concurrent players? Close to 3 times the concurrent players as Silent Hill 2 the Remake. So if we're just going to use really faulty logic here and assume that Dragon Age: The Veilguard goes on to sell 3 million copies in less than a week, EA will be fucking thrilled by that. That'll be undeniably a huge success for this franchise, and would lead to it going on to become the best-selling game in the franchise without a shadow of a doubt. So, yeah, once again, those stats don't really mean a whole lot, especially with single-player games, but regardless, it's I think just good news across the board, that good games still outweigh all the silly noise that may accompany them. So shout out to you. Shout out to all the people that went out there and supported it. That way that we can get Mass Effect 5 or Mass Effect, whatever the fuck they're going to call it. That's really all I care about with this whole situation. Dragon Age: The Veilguard's cool, but I'm really just looking forward to more Mass Effect, man. So we shall see. Hopefully, I don't know, probably not a Game Awards reveal. Probably way too soon for that, but maybe 2027 release for Mass Effect. I know they were talking about 2030. I'm hoping not 2030, man. Let's get a 2027 release for the next Mass Effect. Yeah, I doubt it.